we had a debate come up in FGC Twitter that was addressing new school versus old school. But it seems like where the conversation was going towards was, basically who had it rougher, the new school or the old school. How do you feel about this new school versus old school debate?
What I've been seeing on Twitter is like it's a lot of like, I guess, oh, we better than your school, and I mean, it's the FGC at the end of the day. Both have their their own like certain elements that like really like add to the FGC. I would say with the old school, I feel like it was one of those things where it was innately harder in a sense because it's like there are so many factors that played into it. Like at that time, I'm pretty sure travel to places was a lot less common. Um, Getting around like other players, getting around good tech, having to actually pay like each time you played in arcades, waiting in lines, learning tech and combos because there was no training mode. Like if you had to go to the arcade, I guess I can group arcade and like when fighting games got on home consoles. But even then, like there was no like YouTube to find stuff. There was no like event hubs to show you anything like that. Any of these discords to show you like what combos, what B and Bs to use. Even like what characters are good or bad. Like you might be playing a character for a while and it's like, oh, I think this character can work out, and they might be one of the worst in the game, but you never find out till later on. And I think like nowadays in the quote unquote new school FEC, you usually figure out what characters are where they place in the tiers fairly fast. I mean, it takes some time, it does, but like earlier on, you do kind of get a good sense of like what characters can do what and how they stack up against each other. New school is like you have online, which isn't a end all be all because online has its own issues, but you do get an option to play against a lot of people around the world. So that's one of the things that the new school FGC quote unquote has kind of brought to the FGC as a whole. You can play against people from I'm in Mississippi or this person's in Georgia, this person's in Turkey somewhere. We can play each other. Now the connection might suffer a bit depending on like the distance and how good a person's internet is, but that's definitely a good thing. And it also can increase the pool of players and it can increase the difficulty. But in my opinion, a lot of time we look at like these tournaments and stuff. Some games, a lot of the people that were quote unquote in the older school are still placing well, still consistent. So it's like, well, it to me it's just an FGC. That's why I just like all of it is hand in hand. The stuff that the older school players had to go through has paved the way for like what the new school players are doing now. So I don't think it should be this whole thing of what I've been seeing on Twitter is like, oh, we're better than you. It's like, look, we are the FGC. So let's just we got older school players that we pay homage to and like respect for them grinding it out and being the best in their respective games, and you got new school players now that are really godlike. So it's like everybody's play some fighting games and be quiet. That's what I say.
Uh, yeah, I'm gonna have to kind of agree with that last sentiment there. It's like, yeah, everybody kind of just play the fighting games and be quiet there, man. Like, just it's like, I mean, what's the point even what's the point even arguing a point like that? You know what I mean? Well, what's the point in that? An old school versus new school. I mean, each generation kind of had its own like challenges and merits. Because I mean, it's just a different time, man. Like it's just a different time. Because back in the day, the information was more sparse, so it was harder to get better. So the pool was a little inconsistent. There were pockets that were definitely going a lot better. The difference between a good player and a bad player, it's like was like real way like it was a lot bigger, because especially somebody who has enough time and enough money to go grind out learning different combos and stuff, as opposed to now. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like now it's easier to get the information that you need to become better. So now like we're like saying it's a more even play field, because now the competition is a lot higher because there's so much more information. So many people have more access. People who didn't have access to like learning combos, like they might not have had that kind of time or the money to go to an arcade and learn something. Now they can just like be like, all right, well, let me go look up like the top 10 moves for this character on YouTube. And then they're like, okay, I'm gonna use this move, I'm gonna use this move. I might not use that move. So then they get to kind of tweak their style a little bit more based on what they're seeing on the internet, because now there's all these people all over the world. We got people in North America, people in South America, like people in Brazil, people from all the way over in China, Japan, what's called the UK, all over the world, and all this information, people constantly labbing stuff and discovering new things, and then that becomes part of the meta, and then everything changes. Like a couple new moves, and everything changes for people, and that like then people who adapt be like rise to the top, and the people who don't, they fall behind. But eventually, I feel like those people do adapt. So it's like a constantly changing, especially like we were talking about earlier with the patches, like constant like games that get patched, and then that changes the meta. Then you got to adapt to that. It's the Darwin's theory of evolution, like exemplified through the FGC. Like if that's not an example of how evolution is like the driving force in this world, I don't know what is. You know what I mean? Like people constantly adapting and evolving, because of like how much information there is, how things are changing, how things are just like kind of like the meta is constantly changing. And then just when you think you've gotten used to it, they're like, all right, season 4. Now it's season 4. Now you got to get used to season 4. Now everything, half that stuff that you learned last season, forget about it. It's gone. Now you got to learn new frames. You got to learn a new move. You got to compensate for the new moves for other people. So, I mean, it's fantastic. I would say, I like the old school stuff, but if I had to say which one I liked better, I kind of prefer the new way of things, because now everybody gets a chance to see how good they can be. Everybody has the opportunity to rise and be a good player. I mean, I always considered myself a horrible fighting game player until I was able to get in contact with like-minded individuals who were interested in practicing, who were interested in learning new things, not just in the place where I live, but all over the world. Like even like all over the world. In here, like Texas, in Philadelphia, New York, California, everywhere in the nation, over across the pond, everywhere. So I mean, but what it comes back to though is that there really doesn't need to be an old school versus new school kind of thing. There really is no point in that debate. The thing is, there should be one school. It's the FGC school. There's just one school. There's just that's like saying, oh yeah, freshmen versus seniors. I mean, what's the point in that? Like, it doesn't make any sense. We're all going to the same school. So, focus on like helping like new players and old players working together instead of like talking about old school versus new school. Like this is like something that matters, man. Like forget about it.
Yeah. With this whole, new school versus old school thing, I mean, first of all, with the old school, I really appreciate those guys for the foundation that they set. I can remember back when I was growing up, there was a time where a lot of people was telling you it was pointless you spending so much time on fighting games. And to just have people, during that time saying, forget that, we're dedicated, I'll travel to events, we'll grind and, practice this stuff, we'll spend our coins, and do these things to have that FGC set foundation. Like, I really appreciate those guys for what they did. I really respect them for what they did to be able to get to where we are now. And when it comes to the new school, it's just like, almost every other facet of life, it was harder to do things back then. It wasn't as accessible. So now with, all these things that we have for fighting games being so accessible, combo videos, frame data, and all this other stuff, we have more of an opportunity for people getting to this and being the best that they can be. And I mean, knowing that that's still the same FGC, we should just be proud of where we are rather than just, going back and forth, debating one another. Because I think what it really is like the old school is really wanting kind of like a respect for what they did for us to get to where we are now. And the new school just saying like, hey, just because you guys had to do so much back then, that doesn't take away from us now. At the end of the day, we just need to be able to sit down and have a mutual respect for everyone, because like Evan said, we're all the same FGC, it's all the same thing, we're shooting for the same goal. So it really makes no sense to bring in a division a bit of I played during this time, you played during this time. Like everybody just respect everyone for what they did. The old school for laying that foundation and keeping pushing in hard times, and the new school to just be so dedicated to where it's like all this information that I have, I'm willing to take it in, soak it in, and make myself the best player I can, which does nothing but help the FGC as a whole if we have so many people coming together to do it. So it's really just a pointless back and forth. I mean, we're all the same group. There's already enough things that could happen with the scene to where we don't need to just create any more divisions that are just pointless. There is no reason that we should be doing this. So that's how I feel about it. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all the same. I mean, we want the same thing. We want the same goals. We want tournaments to come back. We want to be back out and make the FGC the best they can be. So that's my take.
I just want to say that also we're still in comparison to like other scenes and other games like your Fortnites, your MOBAs, and all these games and battle royales and shooters. We're still too niche to be like having like a division like this. Like, yeah, we have made strides. We made strides, but we're still too niche and too like in comparison to these other scenes to be like having this type of division. It's like, let us get to those levels of like, League of Legends and all that stuff. But we still too niche, too much of a niche of a scene to be having that type of stuff, type of conversation. That's like trying to start like some little small group or something. It's like, and you like already at the beginning, like, well, this, that, and the third. It's like, look, we still got to build. We still got room to grow. And to me, like I said, with the old school, it's always with anything you have. It's like what came first is always going to be like a component of what's now, what's present. I mean, like Mario, the first Mario game set the precedent and it set the foundation for what Mario is now. And Mario's still running strong 20-something, 30-something years later. So they had to, appreciate that foundation that was set. It's just how you go from there on out, and how you continue is how you build. But like I said, the fighting game community is still too niche to be having some type of division like this. And that's just my opinion. But,
Yeah, I agree with that. It's definitely way too niche, man. We don't have the footprint to be like divided like this. Like I mean, like Devin said, it's like we don't have the footprint for that kind of thing. There's really I feel like we haven't established ourselves enough to like, to do that. We got so much further to go. I mean, like we're doing okay now. I mean, we'd be doing a lot better if COVID hadn't happened. But as far as like where we are in comparison to other communities, yeah, man, there's no reason for us to be divided like that, old school, new school kind of thing. Just focus on getting better and everything will be fine, guys.